Let's see how we can use ChatGPT to create simulation models with Vensim. To do this, the first thing we need to be clear about is that we're going to create an executable file containing a Vensim simulation model. We don't want ChatGPT or any other artificial intelligence tool to give us advice on how to do it, which variables to include, or any equations. Rather, we want it to directly create the model that we can run with Vensim. Creating a Vensim simulation model requires analyzing the problem, defining the variables to include in the model, drawing the stock and flow diagrams, and writing the equations. All of this takes time. However, there is one option: using ChatGPT to complete this entire process very quickly. ChatGPT can create a Vensim model from text that explains the topic to be analyzed. We need to start with a document, a text, that incorporates all the variables we want to be taken into account in the model in a clear and concise manner, including the parameter values, whether real or estimated, that we want the model to take into account. ChatGPT can perform a complete analysis process, from writing the equations to designing the diagram, all the way to providing us with a result that will be an executable Vensim file. How is this process done? To do this, you must start by writing the topic to be analyzed in a document that we will incorporate into ChatGPT. Therefore, it must be a clear document, easy to interpret, unambiguous. Not include expressions such as variable A is a function of variable B. Include the parameters we want the model to incorporate, etc. The second step is to open ChatGPT, write and execute a query, which we will comment on later, attaching the document we have written. The result we will obtain is a .txt file, which is the result that ChatGPT will deliver. And we will save it with the MDL extension, which is the extension required by Vensim to run a model. Therefore, the last step is to take this file, this MDL file, open it with Vensim. And from there we can simulate. What does ChatGPT do? ChatGPT takes into account that MDL files are structured in 4 parts. The first part contains the model equations. Therefore, ChatGPT summarizes and analyzes the text, identifies the variables, and writes the equations in Vensim format. This is the first part of an MDL file and is the first thing ChatGPT does. The second part that ChatGPT writes is the model's temporal parameters. The temporal parameters are the start date, the end date, and the time units. ChatGPT then reads the document and looks for this information. It looks for whether we have defined the start date and the end date, or whether we have specified years, weeks or months in the document. This information is incorporated into this parameter block. The third part of an MDL file contains the diagram design. In this stock and flow diagram, ChatGPT places the stocks, flows, and auxiliary variables within the surface of the diagram on the screen, so that they do not come together too much, overlap, etc. Finally, the last part of an MDL file has some parameters such as the font to be used in the diagram, some synonyms, etc. And ChatGPT incorporates this into this last part of the file. Therefore, what ChatGPT will do is create these 4 blocks and combine them into a TXT or MDL file. Therefore, the query we're going to run on ChatGPT will also be divided into steps. This allows ChatGPT to work in an orderly fashion, meaning it does one thing first, then another, etc. This also allows us to validate the result at each step. So if we see that after step 1 a variable is missing or we don't want it to perform a certain calculation, we can modify it before completing the process further. To do this, We have a tool called David Draw a Vensim Initial Draft, which basically asks it to create a draft of a Vensim model. This draft may be the final version, but in any case it will require us to review it, analyze all the equations in detail, to ensure that it is doing what it is doing and that the results, therefore, are not a black box, but rather that we can always understand what is happening. Therefore, David is a tool that performs all these steps, from reading the initial text to creating a Vensim file using ChatGPT. So, what ChatGPT is going to do is, using David, create these equations and draw the first draft of the Vensim model. Let's now look at a practical example. It's a small example in which what we ask ChatGPT, through David, is to create a simulation model that simulates a region's population. We give it the age distribution data, the birth rate, the death rate, etc., and we ask for a couple of parameters, a couple of results, which are the evolution of the total population and the ratio of young people to adults. Now we'll see a little bit about how this is done. To create this model, David asks ChatGPT to follow 10 steps, specifying what to do at each step. David is a doc file that can be downloaded, read and modified file from a website. It is not a black box. In step 1 of DAVID, we must paste the text of the problem we wish to analyze or instruct ChatGPT that the text is in an attached document. Next, we will copy the entire text of David and paste it into ChatGPT for execution, or we will execute each of the 10 steps one by one. Executing the steps individually allows us to verify the correctness of the results at each stage. The result of step 1 is the differential equations of the model. It is crucial to check if ChatGPT has included all the variables we want in the model, or if we need to instruct it to make changes before proceeding. In the following steps, ChatGPT writes the equations based on the results from step 1. We can review whether the defined variables, the parameters it has chosen, and the equations are correct. Following David's instructions, we see that ChatGPT also defines the on-screen placement of stocks, flows, and auxiliary variables. Step 10 is simply a debugging of everything you've done up to this point to see the result. Surely with more powerful versions of artificial intelligence, it will be possible to speed up this process a little more. For many of the applications we find, David is more than enough and super interesting to be able to enter a text and have it offer us an executable Vensim file that will serve, in the best of cases, as a correct and definitive version of the simulation model we want to create. Unlike a programming language like Python or MATLAB, which require extensive learning of the programming language, the big difference with ChatGPT is that we write the rules it must follow in very colloquial language. Finally, in step 10, ChatGPT writes the code for an executable file for Vensim. We need to copy this text. The next step is to paste the text into a notepad file and save it with the MDL extension. Opening this file with Vensim allows us to view the diagram of the model created by David. In this case, the placement of levels, flows, and auxiliary variables on the screen is quite reasonable. This diagram is based on the initial text entered in step 1 and is intended to be a first draft of the simulation model, which should be carefully reviewed to ensure it is not a black box. Let's see if it can be executed. By simulating the model, we can observe whether the behavior of the variables is reasonable, or if there are aspects that need improvement. We press the Run button. Let's observe how the proportion of young to adult behaves. It starts at 0.8 and then stabilizes. Let's look at the total population and see how it evolves. We notice it is increasing. And now we have a model, a first version that appears to be correct. We have seen how ChatGPT can assist us in creating Vensim models. We have explored what David is, how it functions, how to input data, how to use ChatGPT to extract results, and what results it can provide. It can even offer us the MDL file extension used by Vensim. How is it obtained? Well, David is explained in this book. It is detailed step by step, explaining how it works, how it creates equations, how it creates diagrams, how it obtains results, what rules it uses, etc. Remember that David is a tool explained in the book ChatGPT for Vensim, available on Amazon. I hope it proves to be very useful.